Hey everyone, it's Daniel here, and this video is a continuation of an interview I had with concept artist Scott Willhite. During my art analysis of Life is Strange, we spoke a lot about the design and philosophies of those games, though I decided to save the more general art-related questions for this video instead. There are also a bunch more questions related to Life is Strange that I chose not to include for time's sake, which are found here. So with that in mind, there are some minor spoilers for the series of Life is Strange in this interview. With that being said, I hope you enjoy. Going from architecture into concept art, what would you say is the most challenging aspect about bridging the two together, I guess?
They're surprisingly similar, actually. Really, the only difference is there's a story and there's characters, which I guess in a sense that isn't really different from real world architecture either. You always have a user of the space, and it needs to provide a function for those users. But they're actually surprisingly similar. It's always a challenging process. There's always different opinions. There's always setbacks. The story. We may get way into a scene, and then suddenly the story completely changes and we have to backtrack it and do it all over again. And the same thing happens in the real architectural world. Our clients, games and architecture both have clients and buyers, and they always need to kind of serve those people. So they're similar in that respect.
I guess I have a question. I'm sort of still formulating it in my head, so just bear with me for a second as I get the words properly to articulate it. But it's along the lines of, as you mentioned, with the story, when you're designing an environment, there's a certain mood to it. There's a certain feeling that you would probably want the player to subconsciously pick up on as they're going throughout the story. When it comes to environments that have multiple uses in the story, how do you sort of convey that emotion? Is it through lighting mainly, or prop design, or do you think it's a combination of what is actually happening in the story plus, everything else that's going on? Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure. It's all those things. And what you first mentioned, the lighting, is probably the key one. You'll notice on a lot of the spaces that, the time of day might change. The color of the light might change. When it's a happy part of the story, there's probably some warm sunlight streaming in, and maybe later in the game it's cool evening light or something like that. So lighting's huge for sure. And I recall how much that impacted me the first time I played the original Life is Strange. Just having all the wonderful warm lights coming into the rooms, and then by the end you're in this kind of stark black and white, almost eerily lit underground space. That just really, really creates a mood for sure. And we try to do the same thing in all of our spaces.
I always get the thing that's really interesting to me about Life is Strange is, in terms of, the contrast of everything being very believable, there's also an otherworldly aspect to it. And nature plays a huge part in that, especially in the original Life is Strange. There's always that looming threat of the storm. And I think that's contrasted, as you mentioned, with the warm lighting, with a lot of blues and a lot of desaturated grays that happens at very specific points throughout the story.
Yeah.
And then also in terms of that, in Before the Storm, there was also the fire that happens with Rachel Amber. And I always had the feeling that she had something to do with that. Maybe there was some kind of power involved, or maybe it was just a manifestation of her anger at that point about finding the truth about her parents, I suppose.
Yeah, I think those are, to be honest, I'm not super involved with how those supernatural powers get expressed. That's usually kind of the 3D environment team and the art director kind of working that out, and the producers. But you're right, it's a challenging thing, and with True Colors, color obviously was really evident in this particular game in terms of lighting and everything. But yeah, like I said, I don't have much involvement with that, but it's a very challenging thing, I know, for the team.
I think for me, it's always interesting because I'm from Australia, and the first time I went to America, just through all of the media I had consumed up to that point, I felt like I knew the areas, even though I'd never
Yeah.
set foot on the soil at all, which is always really interesting to me. Have you had any friends or family play True Colors and say, wow, this just feels like home?
Yeah, I have. There's for sure. Yeah, my own family, um, and then yeah, there are some friends that are gamers that played it and just really enjoyed, particularly some of the earlier scenes in True Colors where you walk across the bridge, with all the flowers and you see the deer and the trees, and then you get to the main street. I mean, that experience is directly relatable to anybody that's grown up here.
Is there anything that was particularly challenging as far as working on Life is Strange, or anything that you remember being sort of a hurdle to overcome, I suppose?
Um, I think it's probably just meeting the expectations of the fan base. Um, they're so passionate about it, and the original Life is Strange 1 was so iconic that I find one of the biggest challenges is to kind of live up to those expectations, and yet create something new, a new experience. So you're always walking that fine line of giving people something new and yet keeping it totally relatable to what people come to Life is Strange for.
That's actually a really interesting point, thinking about fan expectations, I guess, because when Dontnod did it the first time, there was kind of no fan expectations, and now all of a sudden people are intimately familiar with the characters, the environments, and all that kind of stuff as well.
Yeah, I remember when Before the Storm came out and there was the reveal trailer. I mean, we were really all biting our teeth or biting our nails because, I mean, if you can imagine being a totally different game studio trying to create a game that somebody else did that was hugely successful and trying to live up to that. So when that trailer was released and people were truly excited about it, and then the game itself was well received, it was a huge relief.
I guess for me, when I'm playing the games, I'm not entirely sure what it is yet, but there is a difference between the Deck 9 games and the Dontnod games, which is like the numbered versions, Life is Strange 1, Life is Strange 2, etc.
Yeah.
I don't know, they have different feelings. I guess I'll have to explore that and wonder what it is exactly, but there is something like a je ne sais quoi, something there.
Yeah.
And I guess it might just be from the fact, as you were saying earlier, about you bringing in your own personality into certain stuff and that kind of permeating throughout the different sets of artists that work on these games.
Yeah, I think it has a lot to do with just the two different studios and where they are in the world and what their own personal experiences are. I do commend Dontnod for doing such a good job of understanding, American towns. They've obviously spent a lot of time delving into that. But yeah, I think it really comes down to two different studios and two different places and different people.
Is there a place in America that you would want to design for a Life is Strange game? Like any certain state or, location that you think would really translate well?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, obviously Colorado, which we got to do. I personally spend a lot of time going to the desert in Utah, and they actually did this in Life is Strange 2. They spent some time there in the canyons, and that is, for anybody playing Life is Strange, if you can get to Utah and experience Canyonlands and Arches National Park and those kind of places, they are truly the most amazing places I've been in the world.
Yeah, that's really, really fascinating. I think for me personally, there is a point in Life is Strange 2 where, depending on the ending that you got in the first game, Chloe and Max, there's like a photo of them, and I think they've just arrived in New York. So I personally would like to see some East Coast stuff as well. I think that could be quite interesting to explore.
Yeah, for sure. That's something I would have to get my head into. Having grown up in the Western United States, this is where I've spent, and I'm embarrassed to say that I've actually never been to New York. I have been to Philadelphia. That's as close as I've been, but
Right.
I've never been to New York.
I've always found it fascinating too, like how characters' rooms specifically, it's such an intimate space. It's where they spend a bunch of their time reflecting and, you know, getting the chance to express themselves through decorations and stuff like that. I've always been a really big fan of how that's conveyed in video games, because especially in True Colors, it was actually Gabe's place before Alex, you know? And
Yeah.
I guess when you designed that environment, did you have a point where you started to infuse more of Alex's personality in the mix of the Chen family?
That's a good question. And there wasn't, the direction really was to kind of make it Gabe's place. And then, you know, as she spent some time in there would be some more of her things in there. So, in a sense, I guess she always felt a little bit out of place in that room because it wasn't truly hers. And yeah, so it was really intended to be, you know, sort of this young guy's cool hangout above the bar. I've been in some of those kind of upstairs spaces above, you know, in those old mountain towns. They have these really cool old Victorian buildings, and I've been in some of the upstairs places where people live, and they're a little bit like that. A lot of times they're just sort of a, you know, not warehouse, but it's kind of a loft type space with things thrown in there and, you know, bits and pieces thrown together.
This is a sort of off topic, but a subreddit that I really enjoy going through is CosyPlaces. I like seeing how people have set up different, you know, their either office space or their bedroom and stuff like that. And Life is Strange has a lot of CosyPlaces. Is there anything that when you're designing a cozy area that you think about specifically?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's really not too different than being, you know, like I said, a real world architect or a real world interior designer or whatever. You know, I think we're all really trying to create usable, comfortable, you know, functional human spaces, and so scale plays a big part in that. The furniture in the room, the finishings, the lighting, all that stuff is yeah, it all comes into play for sure in creating that feeling.
Ah, string lights. The key to unlocking the CosyPlaces subreddit.
And then on the opposite side, if you want to create, you know, an uncomfortable feeling, you know, you can create a very awkwardly shaped room or a very, you know, like a really big room with lots of echo that doesn't feel very comfortable. So it's a lot like real world design again.
Yeah, and I guess with Life is Strange, there is that contrast of, because to me, a place feels cozy when you can kind of compare it to something that feels uncomfortable or, you know, maybe a little bit dangerous almost. And there's always elements of that in Life is Strange, especially in True Colors. You know, I haven't finished the game yet, but there's obviously a lot of setup with Typhon, the mining company. And when you go to find Ethan and that whole area being very uncomfortable, very abandoned, and there's sort of like this mystery that's lingering around.
Yeah, for sure. And that's, you know, kind of going back to what we were talking about with colors as they evolve through the game. The feel of the spaces evolves through the game it's always reinforcing the story, and reinforcing the feeling you should be getting as you go through the game.
I guess with the original Life is Strange having set up, you know, I guess for fan expectations, there is a lot of influence with, say, Twin Peaks, for example, and that sort of narrative structure and about this missing girl and all of these different kinds of things. And as Life is Strange continues to evolve, do you find that it's sort of breaking away from that initial concept and becoming its own thing?
Good question. I mean, I think there's tons of opportunity to explore different, supernatural things and stories. I think it'll always be a little bit of a kind of a classic murder mystery in a sense, but I think that can be just told in an infinite number of ways. So I'm excited to see where it goes.
I've a couple more questions for you. I feel like I could talk to you for like a long time, but I'm obviously aware about your own schedule and stuff like that.
Yeah, no, this is fun. It's kind of getting my head back into all the things we've done over the years.
Yeah. As a musician yourself, because I also played the guitar, and music has always been a huge part of Life is Strange, and I've actually learnt a lot of the songs from the official soundtrack and also the licensed songs, just because of how much influence they had on me. As a musician, what's your connection to music, and how does that, sort of come about in Life is Strange?
I've always wished I could write a good enough song that they would include it in Life is Strange, but I'm not that good. I mean,
have you added any maybe Scott record albums in that record store that you wish you had?
No, I should, but no, I haven't. That's another area where I'm always a little bit surprised because I'm not involved with the music making decisions as much as I'd love to be. Just like the story, it's always a bit of a surprise for me to hear what musicians and songs they've used. And before the storm in particular, that the soundtrack that Daughter did was just really amazing. I mean, I think they just absolutely nailed the feeling of that whole story. And, with the opening scene and everything, it just, sometimes it almost raises the hair on your arms.
Yeah, I'll admit I've definitely shed many tears listening to a lot of the songs in especially Farewell. Like that still sticks out in my head when everything happens and then Chloe walks in and sees that tape recorder that Max has left, and the performances from Ashley and Hannah as just like I don't know. I feel like it's their best performance in that specific moment, listening to it, and then the final goodbye, really hits you.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'll admit it as well. Because the stories are revealed to me quite a bit when I get to play them for the first time. I've definitely got a little misty-eyed here and there for sure. And to be honest, it's part of the reason I moved this direction with my career. Architecture and landscape architecture was a really cool career, and I enjoyed it. But there was always a little something missing for me, and that's where the emotion part comes in. The only emotion you really get in architecture is frustration and deadlines, that kind of thing. And some good times as well. But I really, really love the music and the story and the emotions that come with doing this kind of work.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess I have a final question, which is not Life is Strange related, but I am interested in your other projects that you've been doing. Currently in Australia, it's the 20th, which means that Love, Death and Robots Season 3 has come out, I think, today.
Yeah.
And you had an episode on that. You worked on that, right?
I did. I believe it's called Mason's Rats episode. I haven't seen it yet. I think it comes out tomorrow. You're a day ahead of me, so I haven't seen it yet. But I've worked on a few projects with Axis Studios, who are in Glasgow, and those are usually kind of shorter hits for me. They kind of fill up some of my time when I'm maybe waiting for something to happen on other projects. But it's really cool. They do a lot of work for Netflix and that kind of thing. So anyway, I got to be pulled in and do work on the kitchen environment for the Mason's Rats episode.
I guess now, from going from games to animation, is that process really different? Or as a designer, are you sort of thinking about the same things about mood, atmosphere, set dressing, etc.?
Yeah, that's all the same. I think the difference is that it just moves incredibly fast and it's a lot shorter project. I mean, they just slam those things together so quickly, at least for the conceptual part of it, because the deadline to get these things, on the screen is um, really fast. So it was only a couple of weeks that I was involved with that, and we worked incredibly quickly.
Okay, and I suppose there is an element too about in a video game, the player, has a lot of free reign to move wherever they want, inspect, things as close as they want. But with animation, it's all in the storyboarding and the beats about how a certain scene is going to go. So in terms of design, it's very specific in that regard.
Yeah, for sure. I think, going back to how quickly they have to move, they sometimes have to limit their camera movements to a certain part of the room, or maybe just half the room, for things like, animation, because they're not going to show you the whole room. Whereas, with Life is Strange in the video games, you basically have to have everything figured out and finished out so that, wherever the character goes, it looks good.
I'm more interested about your career path as well, especially to a lot of younger artists that are maybe trying to find their footing in the industry or figure out, what direction they want their career to go. And as you mentioned, you had, a change of heart and wanted to explore more about telling emotional stories and stuff like that. Would you have any advice for younger artists who are still maybe not entirely sure about what direction they want to go down?
Yeah, for sure. One of the things I see that's kind of funny is there's a lot of kids that seem to get out of college and decide they want to do this, and they ask the question, is it too late for me to get into this? And I have to chuckle a little bit, because I didn't even start doing this until I was in my 40s. So, it's never too late to do it. And for sure, if you want to do it, I just say go for it. And the best thing you can do is just practice, never stop practicing. And then, just contact people, like you reached out to me, and I just randomly reached out to Deck 9, and it worked out. So the more you put yourself out there, the more connections you're going to make, and eventually it's going to work out. So just go for it.
Yeah, I think, I was kind of surprised with how far I got with this interview, if I'm being honest, because I had such an interest with Life is Strange, and I decided that might as well just try. Just put it out there, see what happens, and, be respectful of people. And, one of the great things about being an artist, I feel like in 2022, is just how connected everything is as far as online spaces, as far as where you could learn, the people that you can even speak to. A lot of artists that I admire have Patreons, and you can just send them a direct message and ask them if very specific questions about how they achieve things in their work. And I think that connectivity is really working for us and not against us.
Yeah, absolutely. For sure. There's so many resources out there online. In fact, I'd say, if people want to go to school for this career, go for it. But it isn't totally necessary. I mean, I kind of switched midstream. I had some skills, but I really, really needed to learn truly how to understand light and drawing in perspective and really creating realistic worlds. I didn't quite have those skills when I was just doing architectural illustration. So I just started watching as many videos as I possibly could and practicing every night, so that I could jump into this career. And it was kind of funny, actually. You talked about reaching out to people, and early on, there wasn't as many resources as there is now. And so I kind of had to dig to find the good places. And at one point there was a Facebook group called, it was like, Spit Paint is what it was called. And it was kind of neat because they'd put out a topic for the day, and people would, and it's probably still out there, you'd do your quick sketch and you'd post it and you'd get feedback and that kind of thing. And I wasn't getting as good as I wanted to be. And there was a couple artists on there that I really admired their work. So I just reached out to them on Facebook and said, hey, I'll pay you to critique my drawings and to help me out and get better here. And they did that. So I just sent them my drawings. They gave me their input. They did overpaints, that kind of thing. And that was really helpful and, kind of give me a little boost in the beginning.
And one thing I want to bring up is a lot of the skills that I've picked up, I feel, have been from learning from home, honestly, and like reaching out to people and having that feedback is so critical, because sometimes, when you're doing something for a while, you don't know what you don't know, and that includes things to improve.
That's it, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess, like as far as reaching critiques and stuff like that goes, not even sure where I'm going with this fully, but where would you like go to seek that advice, and is there some that you would sort of steer away from?
I would say just look at the artists that you really admire, the people that really inspire you, and try to get a sense of, a lot of them are obviously super busy. I certainly reached out to a few artists that I just never heard back from, and I just said, well, they're busy, I get it.
Yeah.
But there was a few that definitely got back to me, and were kind enough to take the time to give me input on my work. And like you said, the great thing right now is, and this may actually be the better route to go, is to reach out to the people that are specifically doing that, with their Patreon or their own, personal websites or whatever. There's so many great artists that are offering their services right now to teach people. And yeah, just take advantage of that.
Sometimes, as you mentioned, you can kind of see you want to be at a certain point, but you're not quite there. When it comes to things like artist doubt and sort of second guessing yourself and stuff like that, do you have any advice for overcoming those feelings, especially for, again, a lot of younger artists and people that I know struggle a lot with that aspect of it, the mental side of things, with sticking with it and not sort of falling back on any backups and stuff like that?
Yeah, and that feeling, honestly, at least for me, never goes away. I always feel like I never feel like I'm as good as I would like to be, and I always, you see people post work and you just go, oh my God, how did they do that? And so I'm always looking to improve, and that feeling really, like I said, for me, doesn't go away, but boy, if you really want to, pursue this career, you just need to battle through those times and give yourself a break. If something doesn't go well, just say, okay, and it's like people say, when you make a mistake, it's a learning experience, and you just got better. So the more mistakes you make, the more you're learning. If you do something successful and you feel good about, that's awesome. You learn from that too. But just putting the energy into making crap load of mistakes is where you get the most education.
Yeah, I believe there's a quote that goes along the lines of the master has the master has failed more than the beginner has tried. Something along those lines.
Yeah, I'd say that's 100% true.
And it's funny you bring up the feeling of looking at someone's work and going, oh my God, because I was showing a few of my friends your art station and they had all the exact same responses.
Yeah, there seems like there's always somebody better out there, or at least different, right, that you can learn from. And I actually started oil painting a couple years ago, just on the side. Someday I'd love to kind of do it full time. But I just look at these oil painters, and I watch a lot of YouTube videos from oil painters, and even the masters. They all say that the journey just never ends. There's always something to learn, and there's always room to get better.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that there's a point of just not really being satisfied. And it's not in the sense of like hating yourself or hating the work that you produce, but it's more about just having that hunger, that drive to always learn more and every time I look back on my old pieces, I always just see something new that I could have improved. But at the time when I did it, that's the extent of my knowledge.
Yeah, I actually love going back to. I'm actually sitting here staring at an oil painting sitting in my office here, and I haven't had time to deal with it, but it's been sitting there for like 6 months, and I have all these thoughts about it now that I want to go and change things on it. And it's nice to have the time to let something sit for a long time and be able to come back to it. Once you've been able to get away from it and then stare at it for a while, inevitably you see things that you didn't when you were working on it.
Yeah. Specifically with that oil painting, I guess in digital art, you can just whip out the Photoshop file and just add a new layer. But would you go back and redo oil paintings, or are they just kind of like a time capsule for that period?
No, that's actually one thing I learned, and it was really intimidating at first. I thought I had to get everything perfect when I was oil painting, and that was difficult at first. But what I've realized is while there's no erase, you can cover up anything. You can scrape it off. Yeah. You can paint over it. Watercolor is a different story, but with oil painting, that's part of what I like about it, is I can come back and cover up the whole thing if I want to.
Do you have any, I guess, with traditional and maybe, contemporary artists working today, who are some people that influence you?
Right now there's a few oil painters that I really like their work, and of course I can't think of their names at the moment, but I'd happy to send you a list of a few oil painters that I love.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then I could do the same thing with some digital artists. Early on I always loved Sparth's work.
Nicholas Bouvier, I believe, right, from 343 Industries.
I can't remember his real name. I just know he goes by Sparth.
Sparth, yeah. He worked on Halo.
Yeah, he did. I always liked his work early on. Oh gosh, I'm forgetting his name. Actually, the guy who did one of the episodes in the Netflix release recently. Oh gosh, I'm forgetting his name.
Is it In Love, Death, and Robots?
Yeah. Who's the guy who he did Spider-Verse? You've talked about him. I'm just forgetting
right.
his name.
There's Patrick O'Keefe. There's also Rob Ripple, I think.
Yeah, that might be those guys. But then there was kind of the main creator guy. He actually influenced...
Alberto Mielgo.
Alberto, thank you. Yeah, I mean his work is just incredible. And to be honest, Edward Kaplan, I still truly admire his work. He has one thing I love about his concept art that I don't always get to do in mine because we have a little bit different approach. He creates these amazing compositions. If you go back to the original image for Chloe's room, there's that big pinkish purple bedspread in the middle of the room, and then there's a giant television, and there's the flag, and every time I look at it, I'm just kind of amazed by that whole composition because it's so cool.
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now. I've got ArtStation pulled up, and it's amazing how, when we talk about the realm of abstraction and how just a couple of tones and color and value can suggest an entire bedspread, as you said beforehand, that's such a skill. And I think it's so difficult to remove layers of reality and to try and represent it the way that you see it is really difficult.
Yeah, and that's something I think that Edward Kaplan's really, really good at, is he can give you the essence of something with very minimal information, and that's something I'm actually working on in my oil paintings a little bit, is trying to do that similar kind of thing. And it looks simple, but it's not.
Yeah, that's the crux of everything. And I guess with stylization, especially for me, I'm really intrigued by that whole aspect about graphic reduction, and I'm personally influenced by people like Lion Decker in his work, especially to do that with traditionals and the way that he renders forms, and it's very it's like you can see the planes of everything. Everything has form, but it's abstracted in a way where it's almost like tiles being put together in this image.
Yeah, and I think what makes that successful is if they get each one of those tiles or those shapes the right color, the right value, and the right shape. It's really successful.
Puzzle pieces being put together.
Pieces, yeah.
That's how I see it. But yeah, thank you for indulging me for another 10 minutes. I really do appreciate everything. It's means a lot.
Absolutely. This has been a lot of fun, and excited to see what you do with it.
And that's going to bring us to the end of the interview. This conversation was really insightful and enjoyable, so do go check out Scott's work and social media linked in the description below. You can also follow me at DanielAngArt to see what I'm up to. And until next time, everyone, take care and stay safe.